Hi, my name is Chris Jackson. I am a business attorney. I've been one for over 25 years. Today I'm going to tell you why you should transition your sole proprietorship to an LLC and how to do it on your own step by step. I just wanted to quickly introduce you to my dog, Jax. He likes to make an appearance in all of my videos. Apparently not this one. So now I'm going to go through an outline of why to transition from a sole proprietorship to an LLC, and then how to make that transition on your own step by step. And I thought it'd be easiest if I just have this outline and then I'm going to fill in some of the details on each point as we go through it. So the first question is, why switch? Why transition from a sole proprietorship to an LLC? Why do you want to do that? The first answer is limited liability protection. When you're operating as a sole proprietorship, there's no distinction between you and the business. If your business gets sued for whatever reason, all of your personal assets are exposed. The plaintiff in that lawsuit can sue you, take your home, your car, your investments, your retirement, with some limitations, cash in your bank account, etc., etc. You're exposing everything to the liability of your business. For that reason alone, you should consider a limited liability company because, as the name suggests, it limits your liability to the amount that you invest into that company. So by contrast, if your limited liability company that you have formed and you have your business within that as a separate entity from yourself gets sued, then the plaintiff in that lawsuit is limited in terms of what they can recover to the assets of the limited liability company itself. They cannot go after your personal assets like they could if you were operating as a sole proprietorship. Now there are some exceptions to this because if you don't operate your LLC properly, and we're going to talk about that, then they could potentially pierce the veil of protection that the LLC provides you. But as a sole proprietorship, you have no protection whatsoever. An LLC provides you protection, and you have that protection. It's presumed to be there unless you don't operate your LLC properly. Next reason is potential tax savings and flexibility. So as a sole proprietorship, you're taxed as a sole proprietor, and that means 100% of your net taxable income is subject to a 15.3% self-employment tax. Now, if you form an LLC, you have flexibility. You can choose to be taxed as a sole proprietorship, a partnership if you have more than one member, or an S corporation, which is my choice for most LLCs for the reasons I will discuss, or a C corporation. You have that flexibility. If you are taxed as an S corporation, then only the wages that you pay yourself in an LLC are subject to that 15.3% tax. Any distributions you make beyond that to yourself is not subject to that tax. It's subject to income tax like it would always be. And in a sole proprietorship, you got to pay the 15.3% self-employment tax and then also income tax. In an LLC tax as an S corporation, you're going to pay 15.3% on wages only, and in most cases wages that you pay yourself in an LLC that's taxed as an S corp are limited to, and this is not tax advice, but say like 30% to 50%, most CPAs will say, of your net income. So assuming, for example, that you are paying yourself 30% out of $100,000 of net income, then that 15.3% tax, which is essentially Social Security and Medicare, is paid through your wages as deductions when you get paid from your LLC. The other $70,000 worth of income that LLC generated is not subject to that 15.3% tax. It can amount to a substantial savings in taxes. Third reason is enhanced credibility. When you operate as an LLC, the people with which and the companies with which and banks with which you deal are going to perceive you as more credible because you've taken the step to graduate from a sole proprietorship to forming a more formal business in the form of an LLC. The fourth reason is ease of growth. So when you are a limited liability company as opposed to sole proprietorship, it's easier for you to grow. It's easier for you to attract investors. Investors are not going to invest, and they can't in a sole proprietorship, but they can invest in an LLC. It's easier for you to attract employees. They're used to working for a company, not a sole proprietorship. And it's easier for you to obtain lending from a bank because a bank is going to perceive you as an LLC as less risky as compared to a sole proprietorship. The fifth reason is business longevity. So you're creating this LLC, it's a separate entity from yourself. It is owned by the members. So you could be a single member LLC and you're the only owner, or maybe your spouse is one of the owners, or you have a partner. That LLC can exist in perpetuity until such time as the member or members determine it's time to shut it down. So God forbid something happens to the member of the LLC, the founding member or the sole member, or the manager of the LLC or one of the members, the LLC itself can continue to exist. Your membership interest in the LLC can pass along to your spouse or to your kids. It will exist in perpetuity or as long as you want. Lastly, before we move on, I want to bring up the fact that in certain states, your spouse, if you pass away as a sole proprietorship, your spouse may inherit the debts and liabilities of your sole proprietorship. I don't know about you, but that's not a surprise that I want my spouse to learn about after my death. All right, now that you've heard why I think you should switch from a sole proprietorship to an LLC, the question is, how do you do that? I'm going to go over that step by step right now. Just note that you cannot convert the sole proprietorship entity or whatever this is into an LLC. You can't just make a clean transition. You have to take certain steps, all of which you can take on your own, some of which you can hire a third-party service or entity services company to do for you. It's much faster and easier, in my opinion. That's what I do. I should also point out that to the extent I refer to a company or a link that's in the description under this video, that link may be an affiliate link. If you choose that link and you use that service, I may earn a small commission. For that, I say thank you. Really appreciate it. It supports my channel. It's not going to cost you anything extra by using any of my service providers that I recommend. And in fact, I do want you to know that I don't recommend a service provider or a product or company unless I use it myself. And everything that I recommend in any video of mine, I personally use and I personally believe in. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with the pre-LLC formation steps. So these are the steps you need to take to get ready to form your LLC before you can transition your sole proprietorship into an LLC. First step is pick a date. To me, it's not important that you get the exact date, but you really have to come up with a time frame. You have to prepare. Let other people know. We're going to talk about those steps, but you got to think about in the future, when do you want to transition your sole proprietorship business into the LLC? Normally, in my view, depending upon how long it's going to take you to form your LLC in your particular state and other steps that you need to take and how complicated your sole proprietorship is and how difficult it may be to unwind and then restart as an LLC, I would give yourself a month or 6 weeks, just at that time frame in general. Maybe start on the first day of a month so that you know for bookkeeping purposes that, for example, if you're in the month of September and you want to start this on November 1st and you've given yourself adequate time, by starting on November 1st, you know all the expenses incurred related to your business from November 1st forward are related to the LLC and not the sole proprietorship. All right, the next step is check name availability. So, for example, if you are operating under a DBA like Chris Jackson Mobile Dog Grooming, and I'm operating as a sole proprietorship under that DBA, and I really want to keep that name, you should go look at your state's website, usually the Secretary of State's website, see if there's anyone using that name for their LLC. If not, and you want to keep a smooth transition and keep that name, you just add LLC onto the end of that name, and that's going to be the name of your LLC. If you're worried that that name will get taken between the time that you do the name search and the time you file your articles of organization, which officially forms your LLC, then you can always reserve the name for a fee in that state so that no one else can take it. Another option is the entity services company that I recommend, and in my videos where I take you step by step how to form an LLC in various states, I've done them for many states. That entity services company has a free name check service. I'll put a link to that under this video. Okay, this next step can be done pre-LLC formation or post-LLC formation, but essentially you need to, if applicable, if you have a DBA, a doing business as name for your sole proprietorship, sometimes referred to as a fictitious business name. You have to withdraw or cancel or terminate that. I would recommend waiting until you are ready to shut down your sole proprietorship and your LLC is up and running. Now, for some reason, the DBA is interfering with your ability to establish that same name plus LLC for your LLC, then you're going to have to terminate that prior to forming your LLC. Not aware that that happens, but it can depending upon the state. Okay, the next step is to gather the necessary information that you need to file what's called the Articles of Organization and other documents you need to file to establish your LLC in your state, starting with the LLC name, which we discussed. Just make sure it's available. Pick a name. You may want to have a backup name or two. Again, the name picking process, if you use my entity services company, is really easy. You can either use their entity name search, or you can just submit the information that they need to form your LLC in your state, which can be done like in one business day in some states, or several weeks if you don't want to pay an extra expedited filing fee. And by the way, they even have a free option, but you can use their business name search service, or you could simply submit the name and they will let you know if it's not available and let you know you got to change it before they file your articles of organization. All right, the next step is you have to choose the business address for the LLC. So this is the address for the LLC itself. In many states, this address of the LLC will be on the Articles of Organization, which is a publicly filed document, or it will otherwise be on your state's website. So just keep in mind that this is not an anonymous address. You can use your home address. A lot of people do that, but that home address, like I said, will be publicly available. You may also want to choose another option at a time when you're ready financially to use an address other than your home address, because it will appear more professional to the people with whom you are doing business. So on that note, for example, you can lease a space. That's the most expensive option. But if you have an office already, or you're opening a retail location, then you can use that address. You can have a UPS store address where it's essentially the address of the UPS store. You get a mailbox there, whatever the mailbox number is, that's your suite number. You can also have a virtual office. I personally use a virtual office. Two different types of virtual offices for two different types of entities. I'll put the links to both of those under this video in the description. One of which is in Wyoming, and I pay $29 a month for that virtual office, and I get a business address. They receive all the mail, they scan it to me, they let me know. When they receive mail, it's all in one place. I find it to be very convenient. I also have, for another entity, a more professional office address. It's in a building not far from where I live. If I wanted to meet a client there, I could rent out an office space or a conference room, but it's not like I'm renting a place full-time there. However, I do have to go down there and pick up the mail when they receive it. So you have many different options for your business address. Just kind of know what that's going to be in advance. All right, the last thing that you should know is who's going to be your registered agent. A registered agent is a person or entity registered in your state to receive what's called service of process, which is a lawsuit from a plaintiff. If, God forbid, your LLC gets sued, that plaintiff needs to know to whom or to what company to serve that lawsuit. That registered agent has to be available to receive service of process in person during business hours. You can be your own registered agent. Just keep in mind that, again, it's going to be public knowledge, number one, and number two, you have to be available during business hours to be your own registered agent, or you can hire a third-party registered agent. I will put a link below to the registered agent I use for all of my LLCs. I use them for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you form an LLC with them, the first year is free. Number two, they cap their rate at $119 per year. They promise never to raise it. $119 per year is the best I've seen anywhere among all the competitors. You may be able to find something less expensive than that, but that is an option for you. All right, part B of how to transition from a sole proprietorship to an LLC is to form the LLC. So you've taken the pre-formation steps. Now we're going to form the LLC. Step number one, as I've referenced before, is you have to file the Articles of Organization. It may be called like Certificate of Formation in, say, Delaware or other states, but in most states it's called Articles of Organization. This is a form that you have to file in your state to form your LLC. You can do that on your own. Like I said, you can go to your state's website. Oftentimes they will have a form that you can fill in. You probably have to print that out, put a wet ink signature on it, send it in with a check for the state filing fee. You may be able to do it all online depending upon your state. Once that document is filed, then your LLC will be formed in your state. Again, like I said before, the other option is you could have a formation service do it for you. One of their options is even a free option. You only have to pay the state filing fee. Totally up to you. All right, as discussed and in the pre-LLC formation prep steps, you have to designate a registered agent. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. Number 3, you got to create an operating agreement. So every LLC, in my view, even though it may not be required in your state, needs an operating agreement. An operating agreement is essentially the rules of the road for the LLC, how decisions are made, how distributions are made, how members can be added to the LLC, etc., etc. It's important to have an operating agreement for your LLC and then abide by the rules and regulations and processes and procedures in that operating agreement. This helps you retain separate entity status. You're treating your LLC like a separate entity from yourself. It's a little bit less important when you are a single member LLC. However, I still recommend it. So an operating agreement, you may be able to find some online. The entity services company that I use gives you a free one on their standard and their premium packages. I also have a video that I've made on how to create an operating agreement on your own for free, and I walk you through the process step by step. Just note that the free version is not something you can later amend or modify in any way, but I will put a link to that under the video, like I said. And then lastly, a related company of mine is selling legal templates at a fraction of what you pay an attorney, even though they are drafted by an attorney. They are attorney quality and they're in Word, and therefore you can modify them. The reason they are so inexpensive compared to what you pay an attorney is because they don't come with legal advice specific to your situation. I'll put a link to that as well under this video. Okay, the next step and last step on how to form an LLC is you have to obtain an EIN, which is the Employer Identification Number, sometimes referred to as a tax ID for your LLC. I have a video on how you can obtain this on your own from the IRS for free. Again, I'll put a link to that under this video. The corporate services, entity services company that I use will obtain it for you within 1 business day using either standard or the premium packages. If you prefer that and you're using them anyway, that is an option for you. No matter how you obtain this EIN from the IRS, this tax ID, just note that you need to do it in order to open a bank account for your LLC, and I really recommend, for the reasons I've stated in other videos, that you have a separate bank account from your personal account, separate from your sole proprietorship account. So you need a new bank account. In order to open that new bank account, you need an EIN for the LLC. You also need a copy of your articles of organization. Sometimes, depending upon the bank, they'll request the operating agreement as well. But the bottom line is you need an EIN for your LLC, so make sure you obtain that, and you need a bank account for your LLC. And then once you transition and you start running the business in your LLC, you got to make sure you're paying all expenses of the LLC out of that bank account. All revenue of the LLC is going through that bank account, is separate from your personal account, separate from your sole proprietorship account. And before I move on, I want to address a question I often get, which is, can you transfer the EIN, assuming you have one for your sole proprietorship, to the LLC? And the answer is no. You have to create a new employer identification number, a new tax ID for your LLC. All right, now that you formed the LLC, the question is, what do you do next? What are the steps you should take when you're making this transition from your sole proprietorship to your newly formed LLC? And the first step is open a business bank account. We just discussed this. Obtain your EIN, get a copy of your filed articles of organization. Like I said, you may need an operating agreement from that, but most banks will accept just those 2 documents and not the operating agreement. Take those documents, go form a business bank account for your LLC. Once you've done that, you need to transfer funds. If you have funds in your sole proprietorship's business account, transfer those funds to the LLC business account. However, if you need to keep some funds in your sole proprietorship bank account for the wind down process, to meet obligations, to pay taxes, etc., whatever you need to do, and you need to wind down the sole proprietorship, and just transfer whatever excess funds are available You do need to capitalize the LLC with some funds, so you can do it either from your sole proprietorship account or your personal account or both. It doesn't need a lot of funds, but you do need to get up and running with some funds in the LLC bank account. The next step I recommend is to get a credit card that you're going to use exclusively for your LLC business expenses and not your personal expenses. Now, your LLC is not going to have credit. The bank with which you open an account and form a banking relationship may be able to issue a credit card based on LLC credit or give you a line of credit depending upon the bank. They might give you a line of credit for your LLC, but in most cases, for most people, you may have to go out and apply for a business credit card. You will essentially be liable to the credit card company because your LLC doesn't have a credit history. But what you want to do is just designate one card. If you could have that card with the name of your LLC on it, that's preferable. And then use that card only for business expenses. Do not use it for personal expenses. And then make sure you pay that credit card out of your LLC's account, not your sole proprietorship's account, and not your personal account. Just much easier to separate what you're doing with the LLC and to track your expenses for bookkeeping purposes, etc. Okay, next step is to update your licenses and or permits depending upon the type of business you have, the state, county, and city in which your business is located. You may need a permit or a license for what you do. You may not. But if you had one for your sole proprietorship, chances are, if it's the same business type, you're going to need one for your LLC. You should check with the government office where you have a permit or license, see whether you can transfer it to the LLC. If not, you may have to just shut it down, terminate that license or permit, and then apply for a new one for your LLC if you need one at all. All right, next step is you need to transfer the assets of the sole proprietorship to your LLC. So if you have business assets, we mentioned cash in a bank account, maybe you have inventory, equipment, furniture, other assets of your sole proprietorship that you need to transfer into the LLC, you need to enter into a simple contract between your sole proprietorship or you and your LLC, essentially transferring the assets into the LLC. You have a couple of different options for the form of the transaction in this contract. One is you could enter into what's called a contribution agreement, where you're essentially contributing the assets of the sole proprietorship of you to the LLC, and the LLC in exchange for that contribution is going to give you 100% of the membership interest of the LLC, and then now you are the owner of the LLC and the assets are inside the LLC. Another possibility, if you need to do this for accounting purposes, if you have substantial assets, and you should also check with your CPA on how you structure all these transactions and or your attorney, is to have a bill of sale or some sort of asset transfer agreement whereby there is a transfer or sale of the assets into the LLC, and the LLC is going to pay cash for those assets. Now, I think in most cases, a contribution agreement, a simple contribution agreement will suffice. Now, hiring an attorney and consulting your accountant is probably the best practice here, but if you're looking for just a legal template, you may be able to find one online. My related company that has legal templates is going to, if it doesn't already have a contribution agreement that addresses this very transaction, it'll be called a sole proprietorship to LLC contribution agreement. I'll put a link to that company's website underneath this video. Number 6, you have to notify vendors and stakeholders. So if you have employees, you got to let them know about the upcoming transition. If you have vendors where you are going to have to open up a new account, then you got to let them know. If you have customers, just say, hey, we are transitioning from a sole proprietorship to an LLC. They're going to probably think that's a good thing. It shouldn't be a big issue, but you just let them know in advance so you know what you need to do with each of those stakeholders before the transition happens. Okay, the next step is to deal with the outstanding contracts that your sole proprietorship or you are a party to. So for example, if you have an employment agreement or you have an agreement with a vendor or a customer, or you're leasing a space and you have a landlord, you need to let them know about the transition, which was step 6, and then you're going to have to enter into one of 3 things. Number 1, you can enter into an amendment of the existing contract where you're simply replacing your sole proprietorship with the LLC. Number 2, you can enter into a simple assignment and assumption of contracts where you're assigning the contract from your sole proprietorship to your LLC. Third is you may have to enter in a brand new contract and terminate the old one. Just make sure if you enter into a brand new contract that the other one is terminated and that termination is referenced in the new contract. But the same related company that has legal templates is going to have on their website an assignment and assumption of contracts form that may be useful to you. Check it out if you need to. Okay, the next step is to update the marketing and public materials. So whatever materials you have out in the public where you're marketing your sole proprietorship, whether it's a website or a business card, or you're sending out flyers or what have you, you need to update these things to reflect that you are now operating as an LLC. You want the public to know that you're operating as an LLC. It's important that you do that so that you create a separate entity status from yourself. So make sure you put your LLC's name and add LLC at the end of the name in all of your materials, your websites, your business cards, your flyers, etc., etc. Okay, and once you've done all that, you should be ready at that point to close your sole proprietorship. So what you need to do in that regard is you have to file the final tax return for your sole proprietorship. Check with your CPA. You can usually do that when you normally file tax returns. And if you have any other registrations, DBAs, etc., as we discussed, you want to shut those down and cancel and terminate them. And that's it. That is the why and the how to transition your sole proprietorship to an LLC. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section. I get to them on a regular basis. If you like this video, I encourage you to give me the thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to this channel, get more content like this, I ask you kindly to subscribe, and I thank you for that. And I wish you and your business all the best. Have a great day.